Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's interview with an MDC partner. The partner of the month at the MDC Studio is Dr. Stephen Restaino. He is the founder and CEO of one of the portfolio companies, Sonosa Medical, and he's a partner. And as I mentioned, he's a partner at the studio. So Stephen, welcome. Please tell us about yourself and the many hats you're wearing.
Yeah, thanks, Nail, for having me on this. I in addition to being a partner at the studio, like you said, I'm CEO of Sonosa Medical. So I help manage all of the new projects, talk with new inventors that might want to work with the studio, and but I'm primarily focused on Sonosa, which is a company that we started through MDC to commercialize technologies developed at the University of Maryland to diagnose and eventually treat obstructive sleep apnea. So my roles are kind of combined between early stage technical development and mostly management of those projects, and basically being a CEO of a new company, doing all that's necessary in order to get that up and running.
Great. And so love to hear a bit about your background. How did you come to commercialize medical devices?
Yeah, that's interesting. So before coming to MDC, my trajectory, I was primarily technical, but as I kind of went through, my engineering education and got into grad school to get my PhD at the University of Maryland, I kind of started to learn that I was frustrated by the pace of commercialization and research, and was really interested in, doing work that would lead to a more direct benefit, to the people I was hoping to eventually help. And so, as I was finishing up my PhD and looking for opportunities, I found MDC as kind of a way to take, some of that really promising academic development and turn that into, commercializable products that might actually help somebody in a much shorter time frame. So, I basically went and, got a solid foundation in engineering, and then have been trying to learn everything that's necessary in order to, create an actual product.
Great. So what does your typical day look like? I mean, if you even have a typical day.
Yeah, I used to, but don't anymore. So, as I've kind of transitioned away from doing more hands-on engineering, and, it's anywhere from project management to, occasionally I still dabble in hands-on development, but I try to avoid that. I have much more talented engineers than me for that at this point. I think it's pretty varied. It can be anything from working through legal documents to developing pitch decks and talking to investors and program managers at grant agencies, and writing up reports and submitting grants. So it's a lot of different things, but it's a lot of fun, doing all these different types of things.
I see. So how are you balancing all of these things?
It to some extent it's based on what the short and long-term priorities are, and what's most important at the time, to kind of keep things going. But in general, it's just about trying to stay sane and keep organized, and make sure you have the right help.
Great. So what are you focusing on this week?
So this week is trying to develop a higher resolution technical strategy that will fit into our overall funding goals. So basically, trying to refine the overall product pipeline and all this, the steps that we'll need in order to get there.
Great, great. So how has your experience thus far been with the MDC Studio and trying to build Sonosa?
Oh, it's been great. I think, Sonosa without MDC probably would never have existed. MDC provided all of the resources that were necessary to really kickstart this, into an actual tangible company. Without I was the first engineer on the project, and have kind of, grown in, various roles since then, now becoming CEO of the company. And I think without MDC providing the infrastructure, the guidance, and the early support to get the funding that we had to do any of the technical development, that the early kind of concept work to get proof, any kind of proof data or prototypes, that just wouldn't have been possible if we kind of started on our own, or if the inventors at the University of Maryland had just kind of gone out and tried to find an engineering company to do some of this work. It just wouldn't have been possible, because you need a whole lot of upfront resources, whereas MDC allows you to scale at a rate that's appropriate for early stage ideas. So taking all of the de-risking steps sequentially, and in parallel when possible, is just much more convenient in a studio environment.
I see. So what would you say is the biggest value of being part of a startup studio?
It's just that agglomeration of resources that you need for an early stage startup. I mean, you need, for a tech startup, and especially medical devices, you need quite a few different types of expertise and resources. You need clinical expertise to help you define the problem and understand who's actually going to be using the device and what they need that product to do, how they need it to be shaped and formatted so that it's actually usable. And then you need to understand how these things are going to interact with the clinical workflow, and that you're actually producing something meaningful. And then you need, the engineering experience and talent in order to actually produce that once you've kind of scoped it out on the clinical side. And then you need the business experience to understand what that product plan is going to look like, what resources you need, financial, regulatory, reimbursement. All of those elements are necessary. And so having those kind of merged into a single entity in the studio is just, it's a whole different ballgame when you have access to those from the very first steps.
Right. So do you feel there are any reasons why people shouldn't join a startup studio?
I mean, yeah, it might not be right for everybody. If you have a very mature product or idea, and you have, routes to get your own funding, it can take from hundreds of thousands to many millions of dollars in order to get a product all the way to market. And if in those early stages, if you have all of the resources that you need, then yeah, a startup studio might not be for you. But if you are an early inventor and you don't have the time to gather all of those resources yourself, or you don't have the network to gather those resources, then a startup studio is a very convenient place.
Right. So yeah, I'd love to know about what you're looking to in the future, what you're hoping to accomplish. What are some of your near-term and long-term goals?
So I think on the studio side, it's really just to find more projects like Sonosa and start and find more inventors like Dr. Wolf, one of the inventors of the Sonosa technology, that have these really promising ideas and want to find that path to commercialization that's right for the studio. And on the Sonosa side, it's really just taking those next steps, really forming that, a company that can take these products forward. We have quite a few technical milestones coming up that are going to be really important in creating value. And, we're raising some money right now to get us through those milestones. We already have quite a bit of proof of concept, and we have some ongoing preclinical trials, so it's all very promising. But in order to create a really stable entity that has the ability to create long-term value, we need to raise some money and take a few really meaningful steps on the technical development.
Sounds good. So I think, an issue that a lot of entrepreneurs experience is, when you're trying to you're on the cutting edge, you're trying to do something that no one's ever done before. There's a lot of uncertainty, both technical and on the business side as well. So how do you handle making decisions and just moving forward when things are uncertain?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's kind of a skill, I think, um, to make decisions with only the available data and try not to spend too much time gathering an infinite amount of information
Right.
when you just have to make a decision. And so I think the best thing you can do is try to identify when you need to make that decision, and gather as much information as you can, and then have faith that just because you made a decision doesn't mean it's necessarily permanent. You should definitely understand the consequences and how you can work through any if that decision doesn't work out, any of those negative consequences. But I think ultimately it's more important to make a decision
Right.
that you're comfortable with at the time than not make a decision at all, because ultimately that is a decision, right?
Right. Yes.
And so that it has consequences. So I think making a decision that you're comfortable with based on that information, and then learning to deal with and adapt to whatever comes next.
That's a good way to look at it. If you do nothing, that is also a decision and that
Exactly.
has consequences. I'm wondering, I mean, have you had situations where you stayed in it for too long, or have you, changed directions when you feel you shouldn't have?
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's happened. I don't think that there's any one major thing that I've done or we've done as a group that kind of kept us in one area for too long. I think I've looked back over time and tried to think, based on the available information, did I make the right decision here or there? Could we have moved a little bit faster? Could we have, maybe pivoted earlier? And I think that that's probably true, but I think given
Mm,
the information that I had at the time,
yeah.
I don't know that I would necessarily make a different decision.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we can always have moved faster. There's always ways to do things more efficiently. And it's good to learn from those, but I don't think that, I would necessarily, dwell on the fact that we could have done things slightly differently, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, it's important to learn what doesn't work as much as it is important to learn what.
Absolutely.
Great. So I would like to know, what are the best and worst things that have happened to you as an entrepreneur?
Hmm, that's interesting. I think so far, I mean, I've been working with Sonosa for a few years now, um, and have really kind of taken over the CEO role somewhat recently. But I think I don't know. I don't think anything very negative has happened. I've gotten a lot of feedback throughout the process, just in terms um, of you know presenting Sonosa publicly, and not all of it has been positive, which it shouldn't be, right? Because then if everybody tells you that you're doing great, then they're probably lying to you, and you can't learn from that. And
Mhm.
so I don't ever look at that as a bad thing, and I can't say that other than people being honest with me, that anything actually negative has happened.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a long road ahead, and there will definitely be some tough times, but I don't mind the sleepless nights. There's a lot to do, and it's fun and exciting. So that's it's startups can definitely take over your life, but it's not.
Yeah.
That's something I kind of enjoy. Um,
Yeah.
so on the good side, I
Yeah.
think just having the opportunity to see Sonosa grow, and kind of building a team and seeing them grow every day is just, I think that's the biggest positive.
Yeah. That's awesome. So speaking of sleepless nights, what does keep you up at night?
A lot of things. So, I mean, I think there's probably one element of every hat that I wear that, that keeps me up it one night of the week. I think,
Yeah.
it's always important to have a long-term funding plan. And so kind of thinking through those strategies, it's not necessarily that I'm up late at night worrying about these things. It's more like that I'm up late at night trying to do whatever's necessary to make sure that those that all of the pieces are in place, or that they are prepared to be in place when the time comes. There's definitely time to be worried, and there's time to plan so that you don't have to worry. And so I kind of try to stay on that first set, or on that latter one.
Yes, that sounds great. And my final question is, what makes you feel inspired?
That's a good question. So, yeah, like I mentioned, I mean, I really like to watch Sonosa grow and the team grow, and just kind of building something from the ground up has just been really fun. And
Yeah.
getting to that next step is inspiring. And then kind of seeing the really big picture, and how we could actually get a product that will impact quite a few patients into the
Mhm.
market, I think is really meaningful, especially
Yeah.
with the scale and the scope of the problem of obstructive sleep apnea. With
Right.
potentially 1 billion people worldwide, with about half of those needing treatment, so that they
Right.
don't have life-threatening long-term effects of the disease. It's inspiring every day to know that we could have an impact on that. It's going to be some time before we get there, but just kind of seeing that down the road would definitely
Mhm.
keep me going.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Naya. This has been fun.
Thank you. Bye.